Hey guys, I'm David.
And I'm Mavis, and we've been coming to Calvary since 2018. And when we first came, it was David's sister who invited us, and we had such a great experience. Everyone was like smiling and full of joy when we walked through the doors. And
yeah, we definitely had a really good experience that time. Fortunately, we did live 45 minutes away, so we did try out different churches to see if we found something close to home. But ultimately, Calvary felt like home. Like, we continued doing the 45-minute drives every week.
And now we live much closer, thankfully. And one of the biggest decisions of why we moved where we moved was to be close to Calvary, and be able to be participants of the church, to be members of the church.
So our faith journey really began, I think, coming to Calvary. I would say our relationship with God. Right. And in Calvary, that's where our journey kind of began, taking step by step the next step to building a relationship with God. It's definitely where we made our decision. We gave our lives to Jesus here, which was a big moment for us.
We got baptized here. We did our daughter's baby dedication here. And we just feel like Calvary is such a safe place and a place that inspires us, where we get to seek more knowledge from our pastors, build relationships, worship, and it's just so much fun. Our Sunday wouldn't be complete without coming to Calvary. Community really has been the heart of the church and has made us take so many next steps. So it's been really exciting time for us here at Calvary.
The next step was having our baby grow up here and wanting her to go to the first drop off. That was, it wasn't daycare, it was here, and it was great because the people around you and, and now she is
about to be 3 years
and staying with at the daycare, and she's happy and she's making friends and things that as a parent is important to you, right? We feel safe when we drop her off. When we talk about this initiative, our first thoughts is we're growing, right? It's a sign that the church is reaching more and more people every day, including especially the youth. It's exciting, and we're so happy to hear that because at the end of the day, my daughter, she grows every day more and more. I'm thinking about her future and seeing that the church is growing and they're going to have a designated area just for them to worship. I'm just excited. I wish I could be young again.
Building the next generation. Building up the next generation is one of the most important things. As a teacher for 10 years, I can tell you that kids are incredible. And the more we pour into them, the better they become. And knowing God's word and being surrounded by God's people is an incredible atmosphere for them to grow up in. So we're just excited about the youth area. We're excited about having a cafe where we can come work and pray and just surround ourselves with a great community. Being part of this next step with Calvary is so exciting.
And we look back at the history of Calvary and see where they started and where they are now. And you just can't imagine where we're going to be 5 to 10 years for us, for our daughter, who's going to be able to grow in this building, learn, and just build relationships in the community of Calvary. So we're super excited.
Our commitment is not only to reach out as many people as we can to come to Calvary and join us, but also to donate a portion of our Christmas minis funds to Calvary in support of the next initiative.
Hey, we are really glad that you're here with us. And just FYI, this is, you got a next brochure and envelope on your seat. If you're like, I didn't get one, you did. You're just sitting on it. And that's why the seat feels uncomfortable. And but if just so you know, if you haven't participated yet, don't worry, there's still time. You can fill out the envelope, or you can click on this QR code and you can go to, that'll take you to calvarynext.com. If you're like me, you do everything digitally, then you can sign up for that digitally as well. And at the end of the service, we're going to collect all of those so that everybody can participate in this vision as we go forward. Okay, so several years ago, my family and I were at the shops at Pembroke Gardens for lunch, and we were we had lunch, and then we had, some leftovers, and so we were going to put it in the car. And so my son said, "Hey, Dad, can I put it in the car?" And I said, "Sure." So I give him my keys. Now, that was my son who sang the first song playing guitar here just a moment ago. And so he did a great job. We're very proud of him. And so he's 15 now. In this story, he's 4. So just to set expectations. So anyway, but he says, "Okay, Dad, can I be the one to open the car?" And I said, "Yeah." So he says, so I'm like, "Look, so you got this bottom button. You don't just press it, you got to hold it, and that's what will open up the hatch to our minivan." And so anyway, he said, "Okay, great." And then, but he pressed it and nothing happens. I'm like, "Buddy, you can't just press it, you got to hold it." Okay, he holds it and nothing happens. So I grab the keys out of his, and I'm like, "Let me grab them, let me see." I'm like, "Look, you got to see, you got to hold that." So I press it, hold it, and nothing happens. And I'm like, "What is going on?" And then I start looking at the car, and I'm like, "Dude, why did somebody take the Calvary sticker off my car? And while I'm on it, why did someone put an Arizona license plate on my car?" And then I kind of this is like one of those Sixth Sense moments, but I'm like Bruce Willis at the end. And I'm stepping back, and I see like 4 cars over, there's a minivan that's just like the hatch is going up and down. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so I'm like, "Buddy, hey, why don't we just walk over here? We'll walk over here to this car, and that'll be fine." And I'm like, "Hey, and by the way, let's never speak of this to your mom, because I'll never hear the end of it." So, but listen, that's the power of focus, where sometimes we will focus on one thing and we just don't even realize what's going on all around us. And sometimes we don't realize that what we focus on determines how we view life. And there are people, not you guys, other people, but they look at life and only see problems. And when you look at life and only see problems, your life is unnecessarily difficult. People ask me all the time, like, "How do you have so many stories? Why all these funny things happen to you?" The stuff that happens to me because I'm just watching for it. And because my general view of life is that life is hilarious. And so I just tend to see a lot of humor in life. And so I find myself laughing a lot. And that's how that happens. And so, and by the way, and some people will focus, their focus is on what God has done in their life. And you know what happens if you focus on what God has done? Your life becomes an unfolding series of lessons, blessings, and stepping stones about where it is that God is taking you. And by the way, we haven't even done anything to change anything in our life yet. All we've done is just decide what it is that we're going to focus on. And it really is amazing to me how 2 people can have the same experience and get 2 totally different things out of it, all because of what they focus on. A while back, I was at the post office. It was a Friday afternoon, and apparently everyone in this area decided that the post office was the place to be. So I walk in, and there is 15 people in this line. So I'm like, I got to send these things out. So I get in the line. The guy behind the counter is really making it his mission to work as slowly as possible. And I'm like, okay, that's something. And then a couple minutes after the line is still going. So I'm like number 15 or so in line. There's like 7 or 8 people in line, and the line is to the double doors at the post office. So anyway, there's a lady that comes in, and she's like maybe 2 or 3 people behind me. But she is completely coming unglued with this line. She's yelling at the guy behind the counter, telling him to work faster. And then there's also people that are showing, and listen, when you show up at the post office, you got to have like the return address. You got to have all that stuff done. People like, yeah, I'm going to mail this out. Where are you mailing it to? Oh, well, this place on the phone. Like, you got to write down the address. Oh, can I have like a little thing? Oh, yeah, here. It's right there. Oh, you have a pen? Oh, yeah, thanks. Do you know how to spell? Anyway, so it's like all kinds of problems. So anyway, and the lady's going crazy even with the customers, saying some words I can't repeat in church. And so I'm waiting, and I'm at this. I know it's going to be a while, and I have a bunch of stuff I got to respond to. So I get my phone. I'm just firing back some emails and texts I got to respond to. So I'm kind of doing all that. Eventually, it gets to the front, and I mail out my packages. I'm on the way out. Well, what I didn't realize is that while this lady was going crazy, because she had kind of become the focus of everything, about 3 or 4 people behind her, a police officer had come in, and he was waiting in line. So I finish, and I'm walking out, and the guy behind the counter sees the police officer and says, "Officer, are you on duty?" And he says, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, then you come to the front of the line." That lady blew a gasket. When that happened. And it's just like, wow. Now listen, 45 minutes to send out 2 packages is like, it's not like it's not something to be annoyed about. And but listen, that lady, two different people, that lady lost her mind, and I got a great story about a crazy person. And so that's just what happens. And by the way, can I just tell you something that when God wants to work patience in your life, you know what he does? He makes you wait for everything. So whatever the lesson is, you better learn it fast, or you will be waiting forever. So just an FYI. But now we are in the final week of this brief series that we are doing called Next. And we have been looking at Nehemiah's life and his vision of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. And things are cooking. The walls are being rebuilt. We're not going to cover chapter 5 in our study, but I'll tell you kind of the brief thing that happens is that Nehemiah gets named the governor of Jerusalem. He ends up serving for about 12 years. But his number one focus and mission in these early months is rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. And all the while, there's still opposition, there's still problems. But like any goal, if it's worth doing, you have to stay focused, you have to pursue it. Because listen, whatever God has called you to do, it's God's job to place the calling on you. It's his job to open the doors at the appropriate moments. It's our job to be faithful and to do whatever is necessary to see what he has called us to do happens. So we're going to start in chapter 6 of Nehemiah, and we're going to start in verse 1, and here's what we read. It says, "Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks in it, though at the time I had not hung the doors in the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, 'Come, let us meet among the villages in the plain of Ono.'" Now this is where Yoko Ono is from, and everyone in that city is committed to breaking up the Beatles. So anyway, that's just what their mission is over there. Anyway, but they thought to do me harm, so I sent messengers to them, saying, "I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you?" But they sent me this message 4 times, and I answered in the same manner. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me as before, the 5th time, with an open letter in his hand. And in it was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall, that you may be their king, and that you have appointed prophets to proclaim you at Jerusalem, saying there is a king in Judah. Now, these matters will be reported to the king, so come, therefore, and let us consult together." And then I sent to him, saying, "No such thing as you are saying is being done, but you invent them in your own heart. For they were trying to make us afraid, saying their hands will be weakened, and it will not be done." And here's Nehemiah's prayer. "Now, therefore, O God, strengthen my hands." Now, if you pause there and give me your attention, there's 3 things we're going to look at in relation to keeping your vision in focus. And the first is this, is that I need to prioritize what's most important. Now, I want you to notice that in our last study, if you were here, that these guys were hurling insults. They were saying that, oh, even if a fox jumps on that wall, the whole wall will come tumbling down. Now they're saying, "Hey, let's have a meeting and let's talk this over, and maybe you can help us understand what you're doing. Who knows? Maybe we can help." And I love Nehemiah's answer, and it's one that we all need to memorize, and it's this: "I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down." And it's interesting that they tried to discourage him, they tried to threaten him, they tried to slander him, and now that none of it works, they're just trying to distract him from the work. And that's why I love his response: "I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down." The vision that God gave Nehemiah is too great to waste precious time. And the same is true for you. If you don't value the work that God has called you to do, no one else will. If you don't prioritize what's most important, no one else will. And listen, it is so easy to lose focus in what it is that you've been called to do. Because sometimes, because life gets busy, we can lose focus, and then we still find ourselves busy. But just because we're busy doesn't mean we're being effective in what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes the days and the weeks just start getting away from us, and we haven't really done anything related to the thing that's most important. So a while back, my wife asks me to go to Publix, to the pharmacy, to pick up a prescription for her. Sure, no problem. So I go. I don't have to pick up anything else, just the prescription. And so I go to the pharmacy. I say, hey, I'm picking this up. They're like, hey, all right, it's going to be about 10 minutes. I say, no problem. So then I grab a cart, like, hey, maybe I'll pick a couple things up. So the first thing I do when I'm just walking around Publix, I go to the bakery. And you're like, yeah, I can tell. And so anyway, so I go to the bakery because they're always giving out free samples. So I down several of those. And then I go to the deli. And I don't know if you know this at Publix, but you can just start taste testing stuff if it's not busy. And so I'm like, hey, can I try this? Can I try this? Oh, I'll have a half a pound of that. And then I try this other thing. And then I'm like, oh, you got these two types of Swiss and baby Swiss. What's the difference between Swiss and baby Swiss? Is it like when the Swiss was a child? That's when it was brought? I don't know. And so anyway, so then I get that. Oh, I'll have some of that. So I get that. Then I find out that some of my favorite items are on sale. And so I pick up ice cream, cereal, chips, other assorted treats. And because I'll be honest with you, my kids know this, I cannot resist a Publix BOGO offer, especially if it's something I like. I tell them, like, I don't want to lose money, so I got to go. So anyway, and my kids love it. They say this openly, much to my wife's chagrin. They're like, we love it when Dad goes to Publix because when I go to Publix, they're like, you buy all the stuff that we like. And that's because my palate is about as refined as that of a 7-year-old. And so anyway, where my wife buys like fruit and yogurt and other disgusting things. And so anyway, my wife will say, she'll like, Dad, she'll say, Bob, please don't buy the kids junk food. And so you got to just create new categories. So I'm like, I don't buy junk food. She's like, what is all this? I'm like, these are candy resources. And then if that doesn't work, you say, honey, they're for our guests. And that's the other thing you can say. Like, really? That's why you bought the 1-pound bag of Twizzlers? I'm like, well, you don't know. Some trick-or-treater is going to come who's late to the party. Well, here's a couple of Twizzlers, unwrapped. There you go. And so anyway, so I get to the cashier, and I spend like $150 in 10 minutes just buying assorted things. And you're like, in this economy, that's about right. So anyway, I get in the car, I drive home, I get all the bags in one trip because, I'm a man. And even like, I'm losing circulation. I don't care. I open the door and I don't know, there's this thing that men do. I do it too. You got all the bags and you're like, whoa! And then you like drop them on the counter. And then you're like, wow, you got both bags of bread on there? Yeah, I sure did. And so anyway, so my wife comes downstairs and she's like, wow, okay, you got a lot of stuff. So she starts looking through the bags and she's like, hey, which bag is the prescription in? I'm like that Homer Simpson meme where he goes back into the bushes. And I'm like, hey, I grab my keys. I'm like, hey, I'll be right back. And she's like, where are you going? I just got to go do a thing real quick. And she's like, you forgot the prescription, didn't you? And I'm like, it's not my fault. She's like, you bought 4 boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. You bought 2 giant bags of gummy bears. And I'm like, first of all, that cereal was on sale. And secondly, I don't really know what happened. I lost it. It did. But listen, and that's just how it works. You just get busy, like I'm doing other stuff, and there are so many things that can distract us from pursuing the vision that we have. Listen, we've got to have discipline and drive and desire. We've got to have those things to keep pushing for the thing that God has put in our heart. Why? Because no one else is going to do it for us. Listen, nobody's going to care about the vision that God has given you more than you are. But you got to stay focused. We have to stay focused, and we have to make a decision to not give up. The book of Hebrews is in the New Testament, if you're not aware. It is a book that's written for a group of Christians that were living in the city of Rome that were undergoing tremendous persecution. They were getting not just persecution from the Roman government, but they were even getting persecution from their families. Many of these were Jewish families that then, when they saw that these people had become Christians, they had been ostracized from their family. And so some of them, because the persecution was so great, they were saying, I don't even know if this is worth it. I mean, maybe we go back to being Jewish, and is that what we do because being a Christian is so hard? And so the writer of Hebrews writes this incredibly theologically dense book and explains how Jesus is better than everything else. Jesus is greater, Jesus is better. And then he gets to this chapter, in chapter 12, and he gets to kind of the crescendo as to why he's been writing to them. And here's what he says. He says, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls, and you have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. What is the writer of Hebrews telling these guys? And the same thing, what he's telling us, is that we have an opportunity to focus on a whole bunch of things. And he says, instead of focusing on the persecution, instead of focusing on how difficult it is, instead of focusing on how difficult it is with my family who doesn't believe the way that I believe, he says, how about this? How about you focus on Jesus? And what you'll see is someone who did not give up even to the point of death. Why? Because of the result. Because of literally what he says, for the joy that's set before him. That is you and I experiencing salvation, forgiveness, and grace, because to him it was worth it. Now, the writer of Hebrews is calling on these games that the ancient Greeks, now the ancient Greeks, of course, you know that they developed the Olympics, they developed the marathon, but they also developed a series of games that were called the pentathlon. The pentathlon was a competition that involved 5 events. It was running, jumping, discus, javelin, and wrestling. Now, when I say wrestling, I don't want you to think like high school wrestling. I want you to think more like MMA fighting, because they wore these gloves that were meant to protect their hands. And you say, oh, so it's like boxing. Like, no, it's not like boxing, and it's definitely not like that trash fight that we saw on Friday. Let me tell you something. However many of you said, it's too late, I'm going to bed. Let me tell you this. You are the geniuses in our midst. Let me tell you what us clowns did. We stayed up to watch a fight that was nothing. My son got home from youth, had dinner, and was like, Dad, I'm sorry, I'm going to sleep. And I'm like, all right, dude, you're going to miss it. And he's like, yeah, all right. And little did I know, he was the smart one in our family. My girls were like, oh, we're going to stay. Dad, you're going to watch it? We'll stay up. And then Carrie was there, but she was asleep in 5 minutes, so that didn't really count. But the girls and I are watching, and they were like, what's wrong? I mean, they seem to like each other. They're hugging the whole time. And why are they not boxing? And I'm like, I don't even know what to say. And then, they get to the end, and they're like, so the senior citizen lost to the YouTuber? Is that? Yeah, that's right. And anyway, we found out his next fight, he's going to fight 100-year-old Jimmy Carter. That's his next match. So, that's going to be a real nail biter. And anyway, I appreciate you listening to that. I've been hostile all morning about this whole thing. Every service, I've been talking trash about that. Really frustrating. Anyway, back to our text is, so they would have these gloves for these pentathlon games that were meant to protect your hands, but to disfigure your opponent. And so what the writer of Hebrews is saying, when he says you haven't, in verse 5, he says, you haven't resorted to bloodshed in your fight against sin. What is he saying? He's saying Jesus ran his race and was victorious, but you haven't reached the level of opposition where you're fighting back punches from people that are trying to disfigure you. You haven't gotten to that level yet. Now, I didn't say this earlier, but when he talks about running your race with perseverance, that word race is the Greek word agon, where we literally get the English word agony. And the idea is that the race is sometimes painful, because life is sometimes painful. But even though it's painful, when you're walking in the vision that God has given you, friends, it's worth it. And that's why when Nehemiah is trying to be distracted, and then, the Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshems of the world are like, hey, why don't we go and talk in the valley of Ono? And he's like, oh no, we're not going to Ono. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. So look what happens next. This is the next strategy in verse 10. He says, afterward, I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was a secret informer. And he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Then I perceived that God had not sent him at all, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way in sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me. And now here's Nehemiah's prayer. My God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their works, and the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid. Now, if you pause there and give me your attention, second thing about keeping your vision and focus. Number one, I have to prioritize what's most important. The second thing is I need to be careful who I listen to. Now, I want you to notice what happens, and notice how difficult this is. Nehemiah gets told by this older prophet that, hey, these guys, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, are going to kill you. Here's what we need to do. This is my prophecy. You need to go into the temple and hide. Now, let me explain that quickly. When we talk, people like, didn't people go to the temple? Yes, they went to the temple. But in Old and New Testament times. But when we say they went to the temple, they went to the outer courts of the temple. They never went into the actual building, because the actual building of the temple was made up of these two places, the holy place and the most holy place. The holy place was only for the priests. The most holy place was for the high priest, and he only went in once a year. The prophet is telling Nehemiah, you need to go into the actual building of the temple and close the door, because then no one will go in there to find you, and that's the only way that you're going to live. And Nehemiah realizes, because sometimes if you read this at first, like, should such a man as I flee? You think it almost comes off like he's being proud. No. What he's saying is, should such a man as I, who's not of the right tribe, because remember, it was only the tribe of Levi that served as priest. He's saying, should such a man as I'm from the wrong tribe. I can't go into that building. My work is outside of the temple. And he's saying, when I realized that this prophet, so to speak, was telling me to do something contrary to the Bible, I knew that he was a false prophet. You see, in 2 Chronicles 36, we're told, let no one come into the house of the Lord except the priests and those of the Levites who serve. They may go in, for they are holy, but all the people shall keep the watch of the Lord. Now listen, here's the point. Just because somebody's nice or says they're an expert doesn't mean that they are equipped to give you wise counsel. And if the counsel they give doesn't square up with the Bible, then you need to run. Because the thing that's important to know, listen, and this is just the truth, none of us are born wise. And by the way, wisdom isn't, you don't just like become wise just by accident. No, you've got to actually seek wisdom out. Solomon, King Solomon, who wrote the book of Proverbs, he says this in Proverbs 3, happy is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. Now think about this. Why is this person happy? Why? Because they sought wisdom and found it. That is, that they were intentionally seeking to find wisdom and in the process found understanding as well. And all of us could look back on poor decisions that we've made and say, I wasn't thinking strategically about my future when I made that decision. And the thing that wise people do is that they think beyond the moment. They aren't only thinking for right now, they're thinking through the moment and into the future. And that's always the difference between the prudent person and the strategic person and the simple or foolish person. And what does it mean to be simple? Simple literally is translated just like young or naive. And that's not a dig on being young. There's nothing wrong with being young. You just got to realize that you haven't figured out all life's mysteries at the age of 20. You just realize that, hey, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and you can have all the talent in the world, but we need wisdom and experience to guide us. And this is why Proverbs 14 says this, the simple believes every word, but the prudent considers well his steps. We have to grow in wisdom if we're seeking wisdom. Now, let me tell you this, and this is so funny, but I have a younger sister who does not eat mozzarella sticks under any circumstances. Now, I know this is crazy, but this all makes sense. And she can't even be around them. I mean, can't even smell them. And it's all of this because when she was 9, she was hungry, and she asked my grandmother, who lived with us, to make her something to eat. Now, you got to understand, I grew up in a very traditional Cuban, almost like Shiite Cuban house. I mean, this is like as strictly Cuban, like, what, is there anything to eat, anything in the freezer? It's like yuca, boniato, and frozen chicharo. That's all there is, right? Deal with it. And so anyway, I knew nothing about snacks, potato chips, what's that? Anyway, so for whatever reason, and to this day I still can't figure it out, but my mom had purchased a package of 24 mozzarella sticks. Like, when did we ever have mozzarella? I think I'd had them maybe like 3 times in my life at this point. Anyway, so my grandmother doesn't know how to make non-Cuban foods. So when my sister says she's hungry, my grandmother makes all 24 mozzarella sticks and then serves them to my sister. My sister eats all 24 mozzarella sticks. And at 9 years old says, I'm still hungry. So my grandmother looks in the freezer, finds another box of mozzarella. This is so true. This is so like deadly true. She finds another box of 24 mozzarella sticks and makes them and then puts them in front of her. My sister eats all 24 mozzarella sticks. Now, you don't need a crystal ball to know what happened next, right? We shortly saw all 48 mozzarella sticks in quick succession. And then she blamed my grandmother for her intestinal ills. Now, if I can just sidebar for a minute, just so you know why she was blaming my grandmother. My sister and my grandmother really did not get along. And for whatever reason, and if I'm being honest, my sister was kind of a pill when she was younger. Now, I got to tell you this is important. Of everyone in my family, my grandmother is the person I loved the most. I spent tons of time with my grandmother. I started loving science fiction, the original Star Trek series from the 60s, Doctor Who. I watched all of that with my grandmother. And so I was with my sister not that long ago. My grandmother died a few years ago, but I was with my sister, and she's like, I don't think Abuela liked me. And now, I happen to know that that's a straight up fact. And so, but what am I going to say? So, and I'm like, well, some people don't get along. She's like, I knew it. She loved you, and she hated me. And I'm like, well, yes, she did love me, but she didn't hate you. She just found you super annoying. I think that's just different. And so anyway, this is where like the hostility comes from. And so anyway, and I'm like, listen, but all you did was you never spent any time with her. You never talked to her. All you did was make demands. You're like a bank robber calling, a negotiator. I want $10,000. I want a car to the airport, and I want a helicopter to Cuba. And it's like, that's all you did was make demands. That's why she didn't like you. Oh, did I say it? And anyway, so now, and by the way, my sister now is really delightful. She's a delightful person, and she's like super fit, works out every day, so annoying. And anyway, but to this day, she cannot even smell mozzarella sticks, which is why I order them 100% of the time when we're together, because I am just friendly like that. Anyway, now, wise people don't eat, better than to eat 48 mozzarella sticks in one sitting. And by the way, we all have a story like that, and it may not be food, of us doing something insane. And but I see that. My son is 15, and I see him. He is, and if you have a teenage boy in the house especially, you know this. They are perpetually hungry. They're never full. It's a lull. It's just, you know what I mean? And it's insane. My girls are like, is he ever going to stop? And the problem is he keeps eating and he gets skinnier. Like, how does that work? I don't even understand that. And I tell him like, hey man, do it as long as it lasts. But I'm just going to tell you right now, you're going to get to be my age someday. And you're going to put on your bifocals and you're going to start scanning a menu at a restaurant based on like what the carb count is on everything. And it's like, I'm going to order what will or won't give me heartburn. And you and your friends will have arguments over the most effective antacid. And welcome to middle age. And so now, but this is just the power of strategic wisdom. You see beyond the moment into the future. Now, I have been talking about this all day, and every time I say it, you can hear a pin drop. So I asked this question. You don't have to, no show of hands or anything. But like, have you ever made a bad car purchasing decision? Dude, I said it, see, just like that. It's like, you can hear it's like, oh, okay. It's about to get real up in this place. And I'm telling you, in the first service, you could hear a pin drop when I said that. And what's funny is that it always starts out the same. Right? You go into the car dealership and you're like, I just want, they go, hey, how you doing? I'm just looking for a car that will get me from point A to point B. Or in Spanish, we would call that un transportation. So that's what we call that. And if you don't speak Spanish, I'm guessing you can probably extrapolate. It's not even a Spanish word. You can probably extrapolate what's being said. So anyway, but what happens is that they're like, oh yeah, you're just looking for something like that. Yeah, we have those all the way in the back by the dumpster. And but we'll walk back there. And then something catches your eye. And they're like, oh, that's nice. And the guy's like, oh, you like that? Yeah? That's cool. It's a nice car. Starts telling you about it. Oh yeah, no, I can't afford that. I'm not going to do it. Okay, but you can just drive one. You want to just drive one? Well, you can't. It's totally free to drive. Like, really? I could drive. Okay. I'd like to drive. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Do you have a driver's license? No. Doesn't matter. Let's go. And so Now, and then, if we're going to drive one, what color do you like? Oh, it doesn't matter. The red one's nice. Okay, let's go on the red one. And then you go. And I don't know why this is. Every car dealership, every time I've ever purchased a car in my entire life, there is always this route that they take that takes you by a building that is made entirely of glass, so that you can look at that building and see yourself driving. And I'm telling you, and then you drive and you see the glass, and then you see yourself, and I'm like, wow, I look so successful in this car. And then you're like moving. I'm like, now I'm rolling deep in this car, and then you start thinking like, wow, my friends are going to think so much of me if I drive this car. And you're like, okay, but how do I afford this car? Well, if I get a second job, if I get a raise in my current job, and that family member has promised me an inheritance, if we can just move them along, I could get that, and then, I'm in the clear. Totally in the clear. And so now, by the way, it stopped being about transportation hours ago. And now you're like, I am never going to find love. I'm going to die alone if I don't get this. And then you get it, and then everything wears off. And you're like, a week later, you're like, oh no, what have I done? And then people are like, is that a 2025? You're like, no, it's a 48 mozzarella stick. That's what that is. And so now, and this is why the wise think about the future. That's what always separates the wise from the simple. And Nehemiah has the ability to think with wisdom, even in a heated moment when people are threatening him, because he sees the Bible as his ultimate authority. Listen, and those of you that have been around Calvary for a while, you know this. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. So when I became a Christian at 19 years old, I had no understanding. I was like a first semester college student. I had no understanding of the Bible. And I remember when I started reading the Bible, my brother, who led my wife and I to Jesus, we were just dating, he gave me his Bible, which was a King James version, which is the Bible. That's like the version you give to people you don't like that become a Christian. Like, yeah, you want to be a Christian? Read this. And it's like, well, and it was tough. It was tough to read that. It's like, because, I don't live in the 17th century. And but I remember reading through, and I'm reading different books, and then I'm going through, and I find this book, Job, but I didn't know it was spelled Job. I thought it was Job. I thought it was like the classified ads of the Bible. And it's just like all the Bible characters like looking for other stuff to do. Like built an ark recently, looking for other nautical pursuits. So what are we doing? So anyway, but I made this decision early on as a Christian that I was just going to live by what the Bible had to say, and whatever the Bible's opinion what the Bible's opinion was of something, that was going to be my opinion, because I definitely wasn't proud enough to think that somehow I knew better than God or was going to argue with God about it. And when I was a young Christian, man, I was just so desperate to learn. And I remember I would show up at church, a church in Fort Lauderdale that we grew up in, or at least from college on, and I would show up just if I had a night off from work, during the week, I would just show up to see if they were doing some kind of Bible study or something. This is before there's no social media or internet. There was barely electricity back then. And so anyway, and I'd be like, hey, what's going on? Is there a Bible study tonight? They're like, well, there is a Bible study, but it's for ladies over 50. And I remember oh, that's cool, I'll hang out. And I didn't care if somebody's teaching the Bible, I was going to be there. Those ladies were so nice to me. I'm 20 years old, attending a Bible study for ladies over the age of 50. The food was amazing, by the way. The food was top notch. And that was the night I learned about menopause. I learned all about, I almost had a hot flash when they told me about that. I was mortified. And I'm like, ladies, I had no idea what you guys go through. I had no idea whatsoever. And I was being cultured all the way around. I left a changed man. I really did. And listen, my point. We don't get wisdom if we just take a casual approach to it. Now, let me show you how the story ends here, at least in Nehemiah's vision. In verse 15, it says this. So, the wall was finished on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. That's how long it took them, 2 months, or under 2 months. And it happened when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was done by our God. And in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them, for many in Judah were pledged to them, because he was the son of Shechaniah, the son of Ara, the son of Jehohanan, the daughter of Shallum, and the daughter of Berechiah. Now, for those of you that are thinking of having kids, I just threw out a bunch of possibility for names. Like Berechiah, let's go. Shechaniah, out of the mud, we're leaving. So anyway, there's a lot. Anyway, you and your spouse think it over. But we got some good opportunities. So anyway, they reported all the good deeds to me. This is verse 19. And they reported my words to him. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Chapter 7, verse 1. Then it was when the wall was built and I hung the doors, when the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites had been appointed, that I gave charge of Jerusalem to my brother Hanani. And Hananiah, the leader of the citadel, for he was a faithful man and feared God more than many. And I said to them, do not let the gates of Jerusalem be open until the sun is hot, while they stand guard, and let them shut and bar the doors, and appoint guards among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, one at his watch station and the other in front of his own house. Now, if you pause there and give me your attention. Last thing, if I'm going to keep focus, my vision and focus, is that number 3, I need to celebrate the accomplishments. Now, there's 3 things I want to tell you that are really important in regards to this. First is that they finished. They met the goal. The walls were completed in 52 days. And it really shows you the power of them focusing and saying, all we're focusing on is rebuilding these walls. And by the way, this is something that the enemies of Israel thought was impossible. Yet because everyone got involved and committed to their section of the wall, this giant vision became a reality. The other thing that I want you to see is that once it was done, he turns the city over to his brother, Hanani, who's the one at the very beginning of Nehemiah, who told them the bad shape that the city was in the first place. It was never about him. And that's one of the things that I love most about Nehemiah. It was never about him. It was about everyone else, the next generation, and those who were coming after him. And then here's the part that I love the most, what we saw in verse 16 of chapter 6, that when the enemies of Nehemiah saw that the walls were completed, they made this conclusion, that this work was done by our God. Because ultimately, when it's all said and done, a vision of this magnitude is a work of God when it comes to fruition. So, as we close, let me talk a little bit about the vision of Calvary and a vision of our magnitude that we are taking on as we step into the future. Now, this is the 4th of 4 commitment weekends that we're having. And by the way, let me just say this, and I've said this at every service. This is for people who attend Calvary. If you're just visiting or you're just, hey, I just wanted to check it out, then you check it out. This has nothing to do with you. We're not asking anything of you. In fact, if you go to VIP after service, we have something we'd love to give you as being our guest today. But what we've been doing in these 4 commitment Sundays is we've been talking about the future of Calvary, that our goal here at Calvary is to raise $1.25 million over the course of 3 years to build a new facility next door that's going to allow us to double our auditorium space, triple our space for children and youth, and then double our cafe space for continued fellowship, and of course to keep the café con leches flowing as they should. And so, but this goal only happens, just like we saw in Nehemiah, they completed the goal in 52 days, but it happened because everyone got involved. Now, let me just tell you this, because, we've talked numbers and all that kind of stuff over the last 4 weeks. There's only one number that I'm concerned with, and it's the only number that I'm focusing on, and that is the number 100. My goal is to see 100% of people who call Calvary home to be involved, because I really want to see everyone who calls this church their home, where they're learning God's word, to see this vision as important, because it impacts the lives of adults, the lives of kids, the lives of youth who are here, and those who are far from God who are not here yet. And so this is why I want us to participate, is because other people should matter to us. Because before you got here, there were people who sacrificed. Those who came before us sacrificed so that we could be here. And now, it's our opportunity to be involved, to sacrifice for those who are coming next. Now, let me give you, there's a question that has come up over the last 4 weeks, and I've been visiting small groups and talking to people, is what if I know what I want to give, but I can't give it quite yet? That's fine. You can do that on the Calvary Next website. There's 3 buttons. You can set up the middle button, and that'll tell you, you can just say, hey, I want to give this much over the course of 3 years. And you can do that on the envelope, where you can say, hey, this is what my gift is, kind of my first and best, and this is what I want to do over the course of 3 years. But you can give that when you give it. Like that part's up to you. But when you decide, like, this is what I want to do, it helps us know where we are in relationship to the goal. And so that's really important. The other thing is, when we talked about this in the previous messages, like, how can someone be involved? And sometimes we wonder, like, man, how can I be involved in just in a more, larger, significant way? Now, let me give you a couple of examples. So here's, like, how does somebody give $5,000 over the course of 3 years? On one of the commitment Sundays, they give $5,000, and it's $125 over the course of 36 months. And that is a $5,000 commitment to Next. Someone who says, I want to give $10,000, it's $1,000 on Commitment Sunday, $250 for 36 months. And that is a $10,000 commitment. Somebody says, I want to give $25,000, it's a $7,000 commitment, $500 for 36 months. And then, of course, $50,000, it's like, man, that seems like a lot. $14,000 on Commitment Sunday, and $1,000 for 36 months. And listen, and you say, well, I don't know if I could do that. I don't have that kind of money laying around. Let me tell you this. Let me show you this. I call this the latte giver. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, Starbucks, they're doing okay. Like, in fact, I've never seen one go out of business. And I heard that they're opening a Starbucks in the bathroom of a Starbucks. So they're opening everywhere. And so anyway, if you go to Starbucks on a regular basis, so this is a person that goes and buys a latte every day, that's $210. That is $7,500 over the course of 3 years. And by the way, I'm not saying you can't buy coffee, and I'm not saying that coffee is evil. We know that's not true. We know coffee's of God. And so, but what I am saying, and this is really what I'm saying, is that being involved in making a difference is simpler than you might realize. And what I'm saying is, because people that came before us, the people that cared about us moving into this building before a lot of us were here, they made sacrifices. They cut certain things over the course of years to say, I want to do something significant. And my point in bringing this up, and you know this if you've been around Calvary, you know that we don't talk about money all the time. We certainly don't talk about giving in like practical Excel spreadsheet terms. But once again, and the reason is not because money isn't important. It's because I recognize this, that churches have such a terrible reputation when it comes to money that I want to tread on the topic delicately lest I get lumped in with those clowns. And so anyway, but my point is that it's not about making giving a spectacle. It's about us deciding and thinking maybe creatively about how we can be generous for the kingdom and for others, because others have been generous for the sake of us. And God has a way of blessing people when we make it a decision that we want to be a blessing. So I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward, and they're going to hand out the buckets where you can turn in your next commitment. If you did it online, you just write online and drop it in. But while they're doing that, I want to tell you this story about, we moved into this building 9 years ago. And prior to that, we had been a portable church meeting in high schools and movie theaters and all kinds of different places. We had been portable for 14 years and 8 months, which, by the way, is a really long time to set it up and tear it down and all that every single week. And so we were able to buy this property, and then we did a groundbreaking ceremony. In fact, I have a picture of the groundbreaking ceremony. That's my wife looking beautiful, as she always does. That's Mia, I believe at age 9 or 8 at this time. Xander was 4 or 5 at this time. Livy is 2. The shovel's about twice the size of her. And here's the thing, at that groundbreaking ceremony, we did a whole bunch of things, but there was a couple that had started attending Calvary about a year before. And they were both in the medical field, but both felt a calling to ministry because they just saw this area, and they're like, there's nobody doing gospel ministry in this area, at least in like a kind of a more contemporary, relevant way. And so they started attending, and they're like, we love it, but we want to at some point be sent out to start a ministry. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And so over the course of the year or so, getting to know them, they had said, we've been like saving money to start a church and all this. I'm like, that's great. So we would talk about ministry and all that and kind of our vision at Calvary. And anyway, they had never been on the property before that we purchased. And so, because we had already purchased it, and then we were going to start construction. So we decided to have a service here, the groundbreaking ceremony. And when they got here, they said to me, the two of them took me aside, and they said, that my wife and I we have been coming on this property for years. And our hope is that when we started the church, that God would give us this property to be able, that was our dream, to give us this property, and that God would let us start a church here. And they said, and then we realized something, that all those years we weren't praying for us, we were praying for you. And then they said, so we want to give you everything that we had been saving to start a church. They handed me a check for $25,000 for Calvary for the construction of this property. And by the way, that's my moment that you clap. So, wow. Spontaneous applause. Wow, it really is amazing. And here's the thing. You know what the amazing part of this story to me is not just they did that. Shortly after, their work that moved them both. And they sold their house. They moved out of Florida. They moved to, I believe, Chicago. And which if they're living in Chicago, who knows if they were still alive. And so, you know how things are there. And no, I think they're okay, but just barely. And but here's the thing. They never saw this building constructed. They've never been here. And yet we have all benefited from their generosity. Friends, throughout the history of this church and over these 4 weeks, I've tried to highlight some of the stories of people who have given sacrificially, and those of us who came next were the beneficiaries of their sacrifice. And that's part of the legacy of this church. And I want you to be part of the future legacy of this church as we step into the future for the sake of those who are coming next. That listen, God has been leading us the entire way. And now it's our moment to take the baton that's been handed to us and run our leg of the race into the future. And when we do, you know what's going to happen? Just like the enemies of Nehemiah, everyone is going to know that this was a work of God. Why? Because the people of God cared. I have this vision in my mind of our first service when the building is done and we have our first Sunday. And the vision is me giving a message and then giving an invitation at the end for people that want to come to know Jesus. And the front of the stage totally full of people who want Jesus to come into their life. And I want to tell you something. I believe that vision is going to become a reality. And I'm going to tell you this. At that moment, when we see all of these people in every service coming to know Jesus, we are going to understand what we were doing this for. And there's eternal reward and blessing added to us for all of that, for making that moment a reality, yes. But listen, we get to decide today that those people who are coming later, that they matter, that the kingdom of God matters, and that those people are worth sacrificing for. And when we do, listen, we are going to find what we always find, is that God always honors the people who honor him. Let's pray together. And Lord, we want to thank you so much for your incredible love for us and how you invite us to be part of your work. You could do it by yourself, but you've chosen for us to be involved because you want to do amazing things, not just in us and for us. You want to do amazing things through us. So Lord, I pray, help us. Help us to see with eyes of generosity those who are not here yet. Help us to have that kind of vision. And we know that you're going to meet us. Whatever we do, however we sacrifice, you're going to meet us and bless us abundantly. And we pray it in Jesus' name, and everybody said, amen. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today. If you made a decision to follow Jesus and begin a relationship with him, congratulations. It's the best decision you're ever going to make. You may be wondering, so what happens now? Where do I go from here? Just text BEGIN to 62488 and we'll be able to send you this free gift. It's a book called Begin, written by Pastor Bob, and it's going to help you take those first steps on your new journey of faith. So remember, to stay up to date with everything happening at Calvary, follow @MyCalvary on Instagram and Facebook. Until next week, we love you. We're praying for you. God bless you.